And I'm here today with Michel to discuss various aspects of his life and some of the works that he's written, especially Rene's War. Michel, we'd like you to give just a quick introduction to yourself about your life history.
My life history runs now on 90 years, so it's a lot. So if you want the whole thing, we'll be here tomorrow morning.
Just a
so
brief.
Just a brief thing. Brief thing is that if you were talking about Rene's War, when I was really involved, 1944, when we really fought. But it started for me one afternoon at the bar of the yacht club of La Baule, where with a bunch of a group of men, we were listening to the radio. And all of a sudden the radio said, war has been declared against Germany. France declared war on Germany. And it has been, I swear to you, like if with a ton of bricks, a ton of bricks fall on my head. Because I was 17 years old, something like that, and I say, come on, where is the future? What is the future? And the future is war. And what means war? It means eventually that you get dead. So it was a very, very, very bleak day. And the way it went, the invasion of France, it completely stopped me of, going studies. My studies after that were all broken off. I was taking a little here, a little there, but I've not been able to pass, if you want, a real exam that I should have passed. And then after that, I've been involved into the war. I escaped Paris in 1941. I went to the French at something which was some kind of an army without guns, which was Les Chantiers de Jeunesse. So I went into that to escape the German. The big thing for people my age at that time was to escape going to Germany. Because the German, it was still going relatively well with the French. The German wanted workers in their factories. So they were making all they could, to get the young people to work. If you go over there, you liberate a war prisoner, So they offer everything. I escaped that. I went to the Chantier de Jeunesse, some kind of a ridiculous army without any weapons. But anyway, I stayed there for several months until the Germans say, everybody in Germany, that age to that age. So then I escaped. And I went to the south. I was in the south of France when that did happen. I escaped in the center of France where my grandmother had a small, escaping Paris herself, had a nice little small house in a nice little village. And I went there and I became let's say, a peasant for 1 year, a little more than 1 year, the horse and everything. And then I started a group of resistance. And then after that, there is a whole story with the British mission, and I became part of the British mission. I can give you the details if you want. But that is basically the story of Rene's War. And many years after, I never wanted to talk about the war for, let's say, 50 years or 60 years. Some of my friends say you should write your story, because if you don't write your story, it's a lost story. Nobody will ever profit of that. So I said, okay, I can write my story. I wrote my story. I never wanted to talk about the war. All of a sudden, I tell my war. So I started to write it at the third person. He, did this, he did that. I found it's boring. So instead, it was very boring. So I said, instead of he, it will be I. So I put myself in my shoes and I go through my story. And it's how it came out.
So where were you born?
In Nantes, by accident. Nantes is the last big town at the end of the Loire Valley in the center of France, going to the Atlantic. When I say by accident, it's because my father was, let's say, a newspaper man. He had a contract in Nantes. My mother was pregnant, so I am born in Nantes. So that's the reason why. But we absolutely, with no attach, nobody in Nantes, just like that. So I am a Nantais, not born in Nantes.
So when the war finished, finally, happily, then what happened next?
Oh my dear, what happened next is that I wanted to become I always wanted to become a painter.
Okay.
First, we wanted to become a musician, but it was impossible after the war, so I said I wanted to be a painter. So now I had absolutely nothing, if you want, just out of the war like that. So I started to work in a. First, I found a friend offered me a room in a small, not a small, one of the township called in France called the Red Belt of Paris. You had a certain number of township, one following the other. We were all communists. So it was called the Red Belt of Paris. Something like 8 kilometers, let's say, 5 miles out of Paris. Mm-hmm. And it was a town, you believe it or not, it was a town where half of the house, and we are in 1948, let's say something like that, half of the house had no running water.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? Just the next to Paris, there are no running water. And half of the houses were wooden houses, shacks. So I started to work. So one of the friends who had a pharmacy offered me, a friend of my family offered me a room, where I could stay. And I started to go in the factory at 6 in the morning, out of the factory at 1. And at 1 o'clock I was jumping in a bus to go to Paris to a free academy and draw and draw and draw. And I did that for several years. And I started to paint after that.
Okay. And when did you, well, maybe I should say, why did you come to the United States?
Aha, that's another story. I came to the United States invited by TWA, which at that time was still, a big one of the first or second company. So they invited me to come to make an exhibit on the Fifth Avenue, in their office of the Fifth Avenue, right in front of St. Patrick. So I exhibited a big painting in the let's say in the showcase, I would say, on the street, and several painting inside. And from that, an architect commissioned me for several things. So one commission to another commission, and at that time there was, to become an American citizen, there was something called a third preference for artists or scientists whose contribution to the national, you sign and you can become an American citizen. So that's how I became an American citizen, because I had commissions in America.
Right.
That is, the exhibit was 1968.
Right.
So it's already a few years ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, 1 or 2.
Yeah, it's exactly a few years ago. So it went very well. I remember there was a group, it was on the Fifth Avenue, there was a group of monks, orange dress, I don't know exactly what they were. Well, they have the little bell like that. And they were always stopping in front of my painting and chanting something in front of my painting before they were. It was a big painting. So I remember that.
It's an interesting scene. So these saffron-colored robes.
Yeah.
So they must have been from Southeast Asia.
No, certainly. Yeah, but they were, where were they located in New York? I don't know. But they were every day passing on the Fifth Avenue. Every day.
Interesting. So we don't really know what country they were from either then.
No.
They just were there. Huh. Interesting. Yeah, because they wear the saffron robe is in Vietnam, in Cambodia.
They were that basically something a religion from over there. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Which group exactly, I never asked them. But they were passing every day, having a little bell and singing a little thing in front of my painting.
Did you get some inspiration from that?
No, not particularly. No, in the United States, so what did happen is that I had commissioned by people.
Right.
So I started to have, in the beginning it was, if you want, public buildings. But then from that I had commissioned by people like you, for example, a portrait or whatever it is. I made a lot of portraits. I made bronzes, also portrait bronzes.
Mm-hmm. That's another skill set in a sense.
Yeah, there is a little story with that, because in the beginning when I did that, I went here to what's the name of the studio of the university, the big sculptor. I forget all the names now. Where I could, have a bronze made out of my portrait in clay. So they were, at that period of time, they were charging me $3,000 to make a head about that big.
Mm-hmm.
So he discovered that in Somerville, There was a little foundry, you could have a foundry, casting. They were casting some, let's say, technical or whatever it was, pieces for I don't know what. So I get in touch with, he was a young man who had that little, very small place, but they were doing it. And so I said, could you eventually try to make a bronze out of my clay? But you have to make, you have the clay, and then you have to make the plaster into which you will fill the bronze. He said, yes, oh yes, we can try. The first one was a total disaster because I didn't know a few things, like make vent for the material.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of 3,000, it was $300.
Suddenly you could do business.
So I made a certain number of portraits in bronze like that, and then he died. Very young he died, maybe 35 years old. I don't know what did happen to him. So one day the door was closed, I could not do it anymore. And I believe that after that, I had some big things made in Italian foundries in east side of New York. Mm-hmm. You have a whole lot of Italian working on metals over there. So I had some big. I have 2 or 3 life-size bronzes in the United States. One which is out of a church, and 2 others which are private, commissions.
Didn't know much about the bronzes before today, so that's an interesting.
Well, Michelangelo was not considering Leonardo da Vinci, and he was even every time they were crossing in the street, he was insulting Leonardo, saying, "You have never been able to finish that the horse." Yeah. Because you have 2 ways to do it: the clay you add, and you can transform, you can add, or you chip, and chipping is much more difficult because if you goof it, right? It's over. Right. Clay, you can redo, you can modify, So clay is in some ways cheating. It's like making a drawing. For me, making a head was like making a drawing, if you want. Then after that, you had the little technical part, which is to put the plaster on that, and the inside plaster, outside plaster, that you could pull the bronze between the two. But that was just technical things, even funny to do. I always wanted to do that. It's nice. And then you color the bronze after that.
Right.
You have to color the bronze. You have to finish it if you want to finish it, which I was doing. I was always working on the bronze itself, and then coloring the bronze.
Right. So you could add the patina.
Yes, I made several portraits, just a head of people, and I made 3 big life-size bronze. But that was all my sculpture.
And then back to painting.
And then back to painting. I never practiced. I practiced fresco twice in the United States, making a wall to be able to put fresco on it. But that was it.
Was that in a church or?
No. One is in. One was in one of the pharmaceutical company in Somerville. What's their name? A big company. For their when was it? Inside on the passage or something. I make a big fresco. But I made that fresco, it was cheating, on a piece of wood with nails to keep the fresco on it.
Right, to hold.
Yeah, to hold the fresco. I did that, and I did one also. I believe there is some kind of a health, I don't remember if it's a health building in Somerville itself. In the center of Somerville, I made a relatively small fresco, same thing, nails on wood. That's it. There are no walls in the United States to make fresco. All the walls are, cheap rocks or whatever it is.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, I would think if I wanted to have you make, or have an artist make a fresco for me, I'd want to give them the wall so that it would last.
Build a brick wall.
Because on the wood, you would.
No,
it
you
would
can
fail.
do nothing.
You would only. I mean, after a few years, it would deteriorate.
Not only that, but fresco has something. It should not be. The background should not be absorbent, or should not be the reverse. Let humidity go in, because humidity will slowly but surely destroy the fresco. So it's why fresco has to be built. Basically, the best is on stone, because nothing goes through the stone.
Right.
And the fresco can grip the stone. The second one will be brick. Then after that, forget it.
Well, if I have the opportunity, I'll.
You build a bigger wall of stone inside. And then I come and I make a fresco. It's too bad because fresco is a very, very economical. It's almost nothing at all. You don't have the paint. It's nothing. The price of it is absolutely nothing, and it's the longest lasting thing in the world. You have the fresco of Pompeii. You have the fresco in Europe. You have Hungary. Countries like that, Central Europe, you have fresco outside frescoes, means that they are exposed to sun, to rain, to everything. 500 or 600 years old, they are like they have been painted yesterday. Fresco is a fantastic material. I don't know why it has been completely abandoned. Even in Europe it's abandoned. Nobody learns how to make fresco. You know why nobody learns how to make fresco? Because fresco you cannot go on with the inspiration on the wall. You cannot do that. Fresco you cannot paint every day, only, let's say, a square like that, because as soon as it dries, you cannot paint anymore on it. And to paint on fresco, as you put pieces like that, we know exactly how many days, for example, Michelangelo worked on his frescoes, because you can see the limit of one fresco, you know, you border with the next fresco. Even if you do it very, very well, you can eventually see it from coming close. So you can paint only a little piece like that. So you have to have the whole painting already, a drawing if you want, of all what you want to do. You cannot go with the inspiration. That's impossible. And most of the modern painters don't have the time or whatever it is to make a very, very classic drawing. And you know you have to perforate it and you have to put it like that. You have to put your drawing on the wall. No painter does that today. It's over. It's a lost art.
Well, maybe you will have a revival of the fresco.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Sorry to hear that.
No, I don't think so. I've not seen, you know, I met a lot of young people, and that's why I wrote a book on painting, because I had a lot of people. I painted exactly like the let's say, the pre-Renaissance, like the big masters of painting. Slowly, very slowly, one cover over the cover, one coming up, like that to change the color, and then. So I have a lot of young people who say you should teach us how to do that. But I didn't want to take students, you know, I have a studio with students. So I wrote that book about painting to explain exactly how all those masters were painting. So that's what I wrote a book on that. But otherwise, no, I could not take students, you know, it was impossible. And I don't even know if I would have had the patience. I try to teach sculpture, but it's easy to teach a sculpture, much more easier than to teach painting. So that's it, my dear. That's my life as a painter.
Okay, well, let's talk about a couple of the other books. I mean, you are a prolific writer, especially considering when was the first work that you wrote? I mean, Rene's War was in 2002?
Yeah.
And had you written other books before that, or was that the beginning of
your
writing?
No. Oh, that's another story, my dear. Because at the end of the war, when Pearl when the liberation came, Pearl, my boss of the British mission, said, "Are you coming with us in England, or what do you want to do?" I said, "I'm not British, plus I didn't like so much the British, but I did." So I said, "Pearl, I am French and I will stay in the French army." So they put me in the French army. And for 1 year and a half, as I was an officer in the British mission, they could not put me at, the rank and file, so I became an officer in the French army. Except that the General de Gaulle said that all officers stay in the army until I tell them that they can go out. 1 year and a half later. So I stayed for 1 year and a half in Châteauroux. And for 1 year and a half, the army was providing me with a room in town. When I saw the room in town, I'm still running. And so I went a room in a hotel, and I stayed for 1 year and a half in that hotel. Now, not doing nothing, absolutely nothing for the army. I did work only one day and I goofed it. Oh, that's another story. But so, there was another man who, also from the army, who created a weekly newspaper. You know, there were at that time, there were a lot of newspapers coming out of the liberation of so he had created one called the Bazooka, you know the Bazooka, boom.
Mm-hmm.
So he say, I'm obliged to go, would you like to please take the Bazooka? So I found myself, all of a sudden, with 25,000 weekly, my dear, 25,000 weekly to publish weekly. So I did that for 1 year and a little more than 1 year. And I was publishing at, there was a newspaper, 35,000 daily newspaper in Chateau. So they had the press, they had everything. So I was printing my little thing, my little Bazooka, on the Wednesday night, at midnight after the newspaper, and they give me the machine too. And so that man, one day he said, hey, I'm obliged to go out, to go away. Take the newspaper. Hey, I was 22 years old, 35,000 daily. I say, I'm dead in 2 years with your newspaper. So I didn't take it. But it's how I started to get, I always wrote in many newspapers in France. I wrote for La Marseillaise, which was the Marseille, but a big newspaper. I wrote in Paris for some radio newspapers and things like that. All my life I've more or less written for more or less newspapers. But books, I wrote the first book in 1945, I believe, which is in the library, in the collection of the Library of Congress. It is called Maquis SS4, and it is not at all my group. It's the story of a friend who had a group and said, can you write the story of my group? So I wrote the story of his group with the signature of the chief. I wrote that, and that, once more, this one ended up, because I believe that the Library of Congress bought, at the end of the war, everything that has been published about the war. When you go in the collection, if you go to the Library of Congress, you will see that there is, even on the French, there is at least 15 or 20 titles of books that have been, at that time, written about the resistance. And mine was one of them. You can find it over there. And the second book after that was the book. Okay, so I told you I didn't want to take students, and I said I'm going to write for the students the story of the oil painting and the